Hello guys, today we're going to do a video on GTA 4 using the Steam Deck. We're going to be starting it off with 800p on the lowest settings. As you can see, I've turned every single setting to its lowest value, which isn't ideal obviously for the quality of the game, but we just want to see how much FPS we can get. And we can get 140 to 150 FPS, which is honestly a crazy amount. I didn't expect us to be getting this many frames. GTA 4 is quite old now, it came out in 2008. It was a PS3 game, but the PC port of this game was actually very unoptimized. You still will get stuttering and slowdowns even on a top-end system. So I'm expecting us to have some slowdowns at medium to high settings. I'm not really sure about the low settings. It's running quite fine so far, even at an uncapped frame rate. Obviously you can go ahead and cap the FPS to 60 to have a more stable frame rate and frame time. So far it's running fine, but yeah, medium and high settings might be an issue. Now another reason you want to actually cap your FPS is the game engine itself. You will run into some issues when you play above 60, specifically the last mission of the game. I know for a fact will just bug out. If you play above 60 and you just want to progress through it, the mission will fail and you gotta restart the whole thing again. So the smart thing to do is to cap the FPS to 60 or below. Alright, now I cap the FPS to 30 and I put a power limit of 6 watts on the system. So obviously I'm unplugged as well so we can see how much power we're drawing. And starting off with 9.5 watts, which is above 4 hours of battery life. Everything on the lowest settings. Now the main problem with playing at the lowest settings is the pop-in itself. It's quite distracting, and the quality on the textures and reflections and all that look basically like a PS3 game. Slightly blurry and they don't look the best, but still possible. Okay, so playing at 60 FPS now, we can see how much of an increase we get in the power draw, but at 30 FPS it felt less responsive, but still ran very smoothly, no stuttering or any lag spikes like that at all. And so far we can actually hold a stable 60 as well, and the power draw is climbing up to 11 watts, so slightly under 4 hours, but still very good. Okay, now playing the game at medium settings. On the highway we're still able to hold above 100 FPS, but I got a feeling once we enter the main cities with the crowded areas, we will see a pretty decent decrease in the frame rate. Since at the lowest settings we had all the sliders down to the lowest, so the car density and all that were pretty much zero. Well, at this point we're playing at 25% car density, so there's actually more going on. The city feels more alive, and FPS will obviously take a hit. This game is far more CPU intensive than GPU intensive as well. As you can see, we are pulling 10 watts on the CPU and 3 watts on the GPU. But you will still get some pop in here as well on the low to medium settings, but it's just not as bad as playing on the lowest settings. And the game quality as well looks very nice at medium settings, slightly improved over low, but at this point we should be able to play the game at high settings no problem at all. As you can see, we are falling into the 50s as well at times, so at this point you want to either cap the FPS to 50 or 40 as well. Alright, our third preset, the high preset. As time goes on, the less stable the game becomes. It's feeling a little more stuttery now compared to medium and low. But FPS is still doing good in the 70s and 60s. But yeah, it's not as smooth as medium and low. You definitely want to cap the FPS to either 30, 40, and maybe 50. But I feel like I'm going to fall below 50 as well in those more heavier scenes. As you can see, the game looks far better. The actual graphics, the shadows, the reflections look a lot better. And the roads as well, the roads look very populated when you compare them to the lowest settings when we had the slider at 0. Right, as you can see, we are falling into the 40s even, not even the 50s. We're falling into the high 40s, low 50s. So ideally, you want to do a 40 FPS cap here. Okay, so I went ahead and capped the FPS to 40, so we can see, go ahead and compare it between 60 FPS and 40 FPS. And as you can see, looking at the frame time graph, it is so smooth, no stuttering or any lag spikes at all. I wouldn't do 50 because you do fall into the 40s eventually. So 40 FPS is the sweet spot. Now you can go lower as well to 30, but at that point you're just losing the responsiveness of the game and you're not really gaining too much from it. Alright, so we're playing the game at max settings now. Every single setting is set to its max value. And surprisingly we are playing into the 30s. So we lost around 20 to 30 FPS by just going from high to very high, which is quite insane for a game that's 14 years old now. But it is this intensive at max settings, and we even fell into the 20s as well. Now the game feels fine at 30 FPS, doesn't really feel laggy. You do start feeling it once we fall into the mid 20s, but other than that it feels playable and fine. But now as you can see, the main problem with having the sliders maxed out, especially the car density, is that the roads become too crowded in some areas super congested and you can't get past the cars. It gets annoying for story missions when you're trying to escape, so I would recommend avoiding maxing out all the sliders. Alright, let's go and try out FSR and see if we can get a performance improvement out of it. Okay, playing the game at 960 by 600, still at max settings. As you can see, the game pretty much is still running at 30 FPS. This area is more intensive than the highway, so obviously it did help, but still falling to the 20s regardless. And it's not really worth dropping the resolution down further, since you're losing all your quality for no reason at all. And for the optimized settings, I chose a mix of medium to high settings at 800p. And for the sliders, I chose 75% for the view distances and 40% for the vehicle density. And with this preset, I'm aiming for 40 to 50 FPS, ideally 40 FPS cap. And if you want to play at 60, I would go drop the settings down a little bit more. The sliders specifically down to like 50% or 40%. And vehicle density down to 20%. To have a more consistent frame rate at 60. But yeah, with these settings, I would go with a 40 FPS cap. We are pulling 24 watts right now at 50 to 60 FPS, which will give us slightly under 2 hours of battery life. And I'll go ahead and cap the FPS in a second and see what kind of battery life we can get at 40. But overall, the game looks fantastic. The actual vehicle density looks good as well. It doesn't look too dead. We do get some pop in here and there, but it's not too bad. The slider's at 75%, so you don't want to go too far above that. It will become too intensive for the actual Steam Deck. But let's go and cap the FPS with 40 and see how it runs. Okay, now with the 40 FPS cap, again like before, our frame time graph and the frame rate graph look very smooth now. And the game is running super smooth as well. We're not getting any stuttering. We just got one there, but it's very minor. Slight stutter, it's fine. And at this point, we're just waiting for the power draw to drop down slowly and stabilize so we can see how much power we're drawing. And we can see the battery life at that point. But so far it's at 19 to 18 watts, so quite good, over 2 hours of battery life with these settings. If you want to get the most battery life, you got to play at the lowest settings. At low to medium with a 40 FPS cap or even a 30 FPS cap. And power limit as well of 6 watts. That will do a good job. And you will get around 4 hours of battery life at that point as well. And looks like we are at 18 watts now, so almost at 2 hours and 20 minutes of battery life. But I think it's slowly decreasing still, so we've still got a bit to go. And looking at the power usage, we're pulling 2 to 4 watts for the CPU and 2 watts for the GPU. We still have some headroom there as well in case of a heavier scene. And our temps look good as well, in the 70s to 60s. Okay, it ended up being around 14.5 watts of power, which is 3 hours of battery life in total, which is really good. Yeah, so unless you want an extra hour of battery life, then I wouldn't play at low to medium settings. You can play at high and medium and still get around 3 hours of battery life. 2 hours and 40 minutes to 3 hours of battery life, which is really good. And yeah, that's it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. If you did, give it a like. Put the channel behind the shirt as well. See you next time.